You talking to me?
We're good?
Should I have something? No, you're talking to me.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Calling this special board meeting to order. We'll start off with roll call.
Kevin Alltucker,
Here.
Denise Diamond,
Here.
Mike Eister,
Here.
Austin Fullnagy,
Here.
Lisa Fragala,
Present.
Steve Mattel,
Here.
Zach Mulholland.
Here.
Excellent. This special meeting is come together in regards to the LCC EF 2329 contract ratification. Dr. Bulger, do we have a presentation on this?
No, I want to turn this time over though to Shane Turner.
Excellent.
Thank you. So in your packet tonight is the fruits of about 11 months of bargaining and 2 mediation sessions with the state mediator. This contract went before the LCCEF membership, was ratified by a vote of 197-2. And so I bring it before you tonight in hopes that you will beat that margin and we can ratify the contract for the next 6 years. And I'm open for any questions you might have.
All right, any questions? Steve?
Just mostly for the record, more than anything else, would you be willing to just kind of summarize some of the, the key points, the high points of the in
Sure.
the contract?
Sure, absolutely. So the biggest sticking points obviously were the economics. And so this contract provides for this current fiscal year 6.75% COLA and full step, which is 4.3% for step eligible employees. For next year, it provides 3.09% COLA and full step. There are several other things that change in the contract that matter more to different parts of that group than others. There's compensation for employees receiving a degree while they're employed here, so giving them credit on the salary schedule for that. Some significant changes to the way that we handle inclement weather closures to provide some additional protection for our part-time employees who were previously kind of shut out for those things. We retained existing benefit levels for the flex plan and for health insurance. So the low coverage costs that our employees paid are still intact. We didn't pass any of those cost increases along to them. Those were very important things to the classified membership. So those are some of the high points.
Thank you.
Excellent. Lisa?
Yeah, I move to ratify the 23-29 collective bargaining agreement between LCC and LCCEF.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Lisa, would you like to speak on your motion?
No, I don't feel I need to. Thank you.
Excellent. Mike?
I'm glad we're here.
I'm glad we're here too. And I want to thank the bargaining team, Shane, for you and the bargaining team. Want to thank LCCEF for their bargaining team members and being a part of this process. I know what those late nights are like, and I really appreciate everyone's effort. All right. And with that, we'll move to a vote.
Kevin Alltucker,
Aye.
Denise Diamond,
Aye.
Mike Eister,
Aye.
Austin Fullnagy,
Aye.
Lisa Fragala,
Aye.
Steve Mattel,
Aye.
Zach Mulholland.
Aye.
Excellent. And with that, we will move to adjourn the special meeting. And we'll call into order the work session. And we will and I apologize, we'll do the land recognition right after the call to order. We'll do the call of order one more time. So roll call.
Kevin Alltucker,
Here.
Denise Diamond,
Here.
Mike Eister,
Here.
Austin Fullnagy,
Here.
Lisa Fragala,
Here.
Steve Mattel,
Still here.
Zach Mulholland.
Here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for doing that one more time. We'll now move on to the land recognition. And we have,
I'm doing it.
oh, yeah, excellent. Thank you, Mike.
I'd like to start our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on is the traditional homeland of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this very land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya.
Excellent. Thank you for that. In regards to responses to information requests, we have that. And I also want to note the questions Zach had in regards to some of the projects were also, it's going to be included in the board docs, but you have a paper copy of those questions and answers. Any additional questions, comments, responses to the response for information requests?
Just one thing, Chair Folnegi, the reason that you have a hard copy in front of you, and I believe that we sent it by email to Trustee Diamond, is because we received the questions this afternoon. And so there was no time for us to put it into the document.
Excellent.
Just to mention, there was some attachments that I had gotten sent as well. So if we can get those to the board as well. Looking at the needs for maintenance going forward, there's a matrix that is very interesting and valuable. So hopefully we can get that out to the board or maybe share it for a minute during tonight's presentation would be very valuable. Thank you.
Absolutely. The one thing I just want to say, and in regards to the SMART goals for the STEP program, I really appreciate the response and the documentation around that in regards to the STEP program and how we want to approach that program. So I just wanted to compliment the information in regards to that. Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, I just need a motion for adoption of the agenda.
So move.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. We'll go ahead and just do a roll call vote just to get that in the record.
Kevin Alltucker,
Aye.
Denise Diamond,
Aye.
Mike Eister.
Aye.
Austin Volnegi,
Aye.
Lisa Fragala,
Aye.
Steve Mattel.
Aye.
Zach Mulholland.
Aye.
Excellent. With the adoption of the agenda, we'll go on to the discussion items. We have the Aviation Academy Program Spotlight. Dr. Bulger?
Yes, I like to give a program spotlight to the board every month. It gives you a sense of what's happening at the institution. And tonight I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tinkham to introduce the Aviation Academy, and we're so excited that they're here.
Good evening, board members and President Bulger. I have the great pleasure of introducing the Lane Aviation Academy to you. As it so happens, aviation is a discipline I actually know very well due to my prior experiences in Massachusetts, where I had oversight of aviation programs, both in my role as a dean and also indirectly with the Massachusetts State Approving Agency for Veteran Education Benefits. So I never thought that all of my knowledge about aviation would come in handy until I got to Lane. And I was absolutely delighted to learn about the excellent work that Josh Reichert, director of the Lane Aviation Academy, and his staff and faculty have been doing to grow this program beyond our enrollment expectations and to also align it with best practices in the field. It is an absolutely outstanding program. So much, in fact, that I have confidence in this program that I took a discovery flight this past summer with faculty member Sean Parrish. And as an educator, I am fascinated about how our faculty take something that to me, and I think I'm going to speak for lay people who are not in aviation, something that seems almost magical and extraordinary into something tangible, and that's something that human beings can do, and they can do it very well. So let me introduce Mr. Reichert, if you can join me. Mr. Reichert is our director, and he is joined tonight by Zach Eisenberg, a recent graduate of our program, and Brooklyn Holmes, our first-year student. And they collectively are going to give you a presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Josh.
Thank you, Dr. Tinkham. Chair Folnegi, President Bulger, members of the board, thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm real excited to tell you all about the amazing changes that have gone on at the Aviation Academy. If it pleases the board, I would like to hold questions till the end just for flow, and I want to make sure you have a chance to talk with the students that we have here. Excellent. Thank you so much. I've had the pleasure to meet many of you over the years. Those of you who haven't met me, of course, my name is Joshua Rickert. I'm the director for Lane Aviation Academy. I'm also a commercial pilot, certified flight instructor, commercial drone operator, et cetera, et cetera. But most importantly, I am a proud graduate of Lane Aviation Academy. Next slide, please. Lane Aviation Academy consists of 3 programs, a drone program, an aviation maintenance program, and a pilot program. Since I took over, we put in years of hard work to create new programs that align with new industry trends. I have put a big kudos out there to members of my team, Tammy Solomon and her team, and all the plethora of other individuals here at campus that have been vital in helping us carve this new path. Next slide. As I'm sure many of you know, the drone industry has been expanding like a crazy train. I often refer to it as the internet of 1998. We all know it's going to change the world, but we're still guessing a little bit at what it's going to look like in 10 years. There's probably future billionaires in their garage right now playing with a drone somewhere. Every day, new things are happening in the industry. So in an effort to get ahead of the curve, we expanded our drone program into what's now known as the Unmanned Aircraft Systems course. Like other institutions, we have a focus on learning how to operate drones and become certified drone operators. But now the program has a large focus on engineering and repairing of drones. This program, students actually get kits and they build and design drones as they go through the program. They're able to keep after graduation and take with them into the workplace. We've even been applauded by our FAA auditors as being ahead of the curve, and they want to work with us and consult with us as they create future federal regulations to govern the new drone industry. Students in this program are placing into $60,000 a year more to start with. I know of a few students that have broken that six-figure range. Pretty great return on investment for a $24,000 program. 2 years, you're out the door making some good money. And giant kudos to Solomon Singer. He's our lead UAS instructor. He has brought an immense amount of knowledge and has taken our program not only curriculum-wise, but also with outside vendors to a level that is just truly unparalleled. To give you an idea, there are for-profit institutions that are a little frustrated. We won't share with them the secret sauce that is our new UAS program. Next slide. Started in the late 1930s and early 40s, our aviation maintenance program continues strong. We did have some scheduling ripples caused by COVID, so I expect some enrollment increases over the next year or two. But this is already a solid, best in the state, be proud of on a national level kind of program. And we don't mind sharing the secret sauce with other two-year institutions and other community colleges. We recently helped Columbia River Gorge Community College start their own AMT program based heavily off of what we do here at Lane. In the last year, we've had companies such as Alaska Airlines, Delta Airlines, Boeing, Columbia Helicopters, Metal Innovations, and many, many more come to recruit students. I actually don't have a time to even deal with the number of employers that want in. I'm kind of trying to beat them away a little bit. So we got to train our students up. For example, students in this program, Boeing came in, they offered students $70,000 a year start with a 5-year pathway to $120,000. Again, it's not a bad return on investment for a $23,000 program. So we're really proud of it. And as you can see by this picture, we also have a facility that I put up with most any 2-year program in the nation and definitely the best in the state. A lot of this has to do with the type of community impact we have that I'll mention a little later on. Next slide. And that brings us to our flight program. We created a brand new flight program now called the Aviation Professional Pilot AAS. We completely restructured the flight school under different federal regulations, expanded training so students now receive all their necessary certifications, made the program more financial aid friendly, and so much more. Next slide. Along with these massive changes, I also knew we had to do better at informing the community about our programs and increasing our underserved populations. For aviation, that points greatly at women. Women make up only 6% of pilots worldwide and around 9% in the United States. The image you see here, this is Amanda Erickson. She's a part-time flight instructor and our assistant chief instructor, which really just means when I'm not around and the chief's not around, she's the chief. She is an amazing pilot, an amazing instructor, an absolute professional, but she does so much more for us. She runs our safety committee, she runs our hiring committees, and just more than I can go into tonight. The world needs more Amandas in aviation. So after taking over the academy, I started doing countless presentations all over Lane County with an added focus on women in aviation. I give tours weekly, if not even multiple times a day. In the last 2 weeks, I've given presentations to Willamette High School, Cresswell High School, Teen Weekend, Teen Aviation Weekend in Independence. I was at the Elmira High School job fair this morning. And a couple days ago, we provided a tour for Leadership Eugene Springfield. The good news is we are starting to see those returns, and I'm excited to say that based on our applications, our next cohort of 40 students is 33% women. Next slide. And yes, I did say 40 new students. These are Academy enrollment numbers. I'm proud to say that our outreach combined with our new programs have boosted Academy enrollments to an all-time high. For the first time ever, all 3 aviation programs were full and waitlisted this year, and flight is already waitlisted for next year. Next slide. Our new program has also become such a poster child of how the VA flight and higher education should work that the VA is having other institutions in the state contact us so I can help mentor them through the process of how to make their flight programs work more closely and integrate better into the VA system. I'm telling you, amazing things have been happening at Lane Aviation Academy. Next slide. Flying Magazine released an article January last year comparing lifetime earning potentials of engineers, lawyers, doctors, and pilots at age 65. As you can see here, not only do pilots exceed those other careers, but they double the earnings in those other careers. Minimum pay for an airline pilot, first year, first officer, is $91 an hour. The lowest captain at Delta Airlines is paid $300 to $400 an hour, depending on their aircraft. And these wages do not include the $30,000 to $40,000 sign-on bonuses the students can receive if they sign a 2-year contract while they're still in school. There may be a high cost to this program, but the return on investment is amazing, and our students know it's a responsible investment. Where else can you make this kind of money with a 2-year degree? These salaries are life-changing. And how do we not note that quality of life? Pilots only contract 75 hours a month, 72 or 75. We're not allowed to fly more than 8 hours in a 24-hour period, 100 hours a month, or 1,000 hours in a year. Due to the 1,000-hour-a-year cap, most airlines contract 72 or 75 hours. So while engineers, lawyers, and doctors are out there working 40, 50, 60-hour work weeks, we technically have 75-hour-a-month contracts. Next slide. There are senior captains in this industry making over $700,000 a year. And of course, we definitely love those travel benefits. I'd like to share a couple stories. This is Emma and Ian Bryson. They both graduated Lane Aviation about 8-9 years ago. They met at flight school. They became instructors together, went through the regional airlines, got married, and they both now fly for Delta Airlines. Next slide. We also have multi-generational students in this program. Their parents went through the program in the 80s and 90s, and now they're sending their children through the program today. This is Dan and Peters and his father. His father graduated many years ago and now flies that Aeroflight tanker you see behind him, fighting wildfires all over North America. Dan graduated a year or two ago, and he's now flying for a regional airlines. We have so many stories like this to tell. Next slide. What I'd like to do is I'd like to give you the opportunity to meet a few of our current students and a recent graduate. First person I'd like to introduce is Brooklyn Holmes. Brooklyn, you want to come up? Brooklyn is a first-year student. She's currently flying the Cessna 152, working on her private pilot certificate.
Hi, my name is Brooklyn. I started the flight program last year of June, and I soloed within a month of flying there, July 2023. What sparked my interest in aviation was my parents took me to a lot of flying like air shows in Chicago, and that really just sparked my interest. I was so fascinated with that. I also traveled a lot when I was a kid, and I would just always ask questions like, how does pilots navigate themselves through the air? I did not know that at all. And then also, I just also had questions like, why aren't there many women like flying the planes? I never saw a captain that was a woman, and that's what I want to do. So I fast forward to probably 16. I went to my nearest airport, DuPage Airport, and I did my discovery flight. That was pretty scary at first because during the takeoff it was pretty turbulent. But then other than that, it was just honestly very, very fun. And I just still think about it to this day. And when I went up there, I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, it was just so crazy. That's what honestly brought me to this program. I saw that this program was really good and I gave it a shot, and I was absolutely correct. The instructors are amazing. They support you. I had a couple bad flights, but my instructor was like, no, do not even worry about that. Look at the stuff that you did, because it was absolutely amazing. I was like, thank you, because I really needed that support system. The fleet's amazing. And then I really like how they have the classrooms as learning. Like it's like, how do I say this? It's really, really beneficial because it's like, it's what you're learning right now. And like when you're flying, it's the same thing learning at the ground. So instead of like other flight schools where you just like, you have to study on your own, no, they actually really, really help you. And I really love that. And I really can't wait to continue my flight training here for the rest of my time. And I'm so excited.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Brooklyn?
Mike?
So it sounds like you may have grown up in Illinois.
Yes, I grew up in
How
Illinois.
did you happen to select Lane? You could have chosen a lot of places.
Yeah, I could have chosen a lot of places, but Lane, they are really like they're in price range, and the other flight schools they're like 200,000 for your whole thing. Lane is probably like 60,000.
Thank you.
The next individual I would like to introduce is Zach Eisenberg. Zach actually just graduated our program. He's now a FAA certified flight instructor. He's applied to Lane Aviation Academy, and he hasn't had his first day, but he is officially our newest flight instructor at Lane. Zach?
Well, good evening, guys. As Josh said, I am a flight instructor. My name is Zach Eisenberg. I'm 21 and a commercial pilot, which is kind of scary, but kind of crazy, you know. But I grew up, my father is a corporate pilot. He had been flying for about the last 25 years. And I always grew up, I had a model in my hand, but he never pushed it on me, you know. I got to pick aviation, you know, years down the road. After high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. It was kind of just sitting about, and I picked flying, you know, and my dad was like very supportive in that and started flying in May of 2022. So not that long ago. And I was looking at colleges to go to after a local flight school in my hometown. And I reached out to 4 different schools, and I ended up having a Zoom call with Josh about March of 2022. And all the other places I talked to an advisor, which is cool and all, but I didn't know I had scheduled a meeting with the director of the program. You know, he dropped that on me in 10 minutes in the call. I'm like, oh, shoot, you know. But that's the reason why I picked this, is because that great 30-minute conversation I had with Josh. He was a flight instructor. He knows the program. He knows aviation. He's not just trying to sell you on something. He's just honest about the program. Any questions I had, he just was like, hey, you know, this is something to think about down the road career-wise. And that's why I picked Lane, was because that 30-minute conversation I had with Josh in March 2022. And then I joined the program in fall of 2022 and started flying a bunch and taking classes. And ever so since then, I've just been super passionate about aviation and want to like inspire others to pick aviation. It's a hard road, but it's taught me many life lessons and has set me up well in life. So
Excellent.
any questions?
Any question?
Well, I don't really have specific questions, but I mostly just thank you, all 3 of you. This is, we don't get enough of this. And so, and thanks to Shelley as well for arranging this. We spend a lot of time talking about, you know, budgets and things like this. It's really great to connect it to students and, you know, and see, and for me, it just reminds me of the value of the Lane education in general and why we do the things we do so that you all can do the things you do. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. On behalf of the board, Brooklyn and Zach, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Exactly. Next slide.
Oh, sorry. Denise had a quick question as well. Go ahead, Denise.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for the presentation. And I wanted to tell you, Brooklyn, that I know exactly what, I'm from Chicago, and I know exactly which air shows you were watching and flying out of DuPage. So I was just also curious if the small airport that we have here in Florence is used as a part of the program.
We don't use Florence, mostly because diversifying the fleet at 2 locations would be difficult. We've often talked about making and whether or not there'd be possibilities, because when the weather is bad in the valley, it's usually good at the coast and vice versa. But then you do have that commute issue with not only staff, but students being able to make it to Florence and back. So at this time, we only operate our home base out of Eugene.
All right. Ties in well with community connections here.
That's right. So if no other questions, we can. We got one.
Sorry, Mike. Sorry.
I think you wanted to say something.
I was trying.
Oh, thank you. First of all, every time I've had a connection to the flight program or the aviation program. I've been dazzled by what I've seen and heard, and that didn't change tonight. I was really pleased to hear about the 33% enrollment of women.
Yeah.
And then I'm wondering about if there might be a more gender neutral way to describe the unmanned program.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, the FAA is actually doing a lot to move towards gender neutral terms. And so I don't believe it's been written into regs yet. There's been memorandums put out. We're trying to change some of our language. So you'll often hear pilots refer to a flight deck instead of a cockpit and those kind of things. And a lot of airlines have started to move towards gender neutral uniforms. So if you jump onto Google, you can see a number of airlines that have come out with those type of things. So we are trying to do better at it in this industry. We actually have some reg changes that are probably going to make me do a lot of paperwork, and we'll get better at it.
Just curious. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Lisa.
I thought you mentioned earlier you were going to say a little bit about the local impact on the economy and our accessibility to aviation here locally that the program has.
Yeah, if there's no other questions, we can jump to the next slide, which is exactly where I'm going to jump in with some of that. So to kind of finish off, we don't just impact our students. We also drive numbers for the Eugene Airport and justify different resources. For example, we were able to justify the vital need of our east runway when the FAA wanted to come and get rid of our east runway in the last year or two. That runway is not just important for our students and our student safety, but only having one runway can significantly impact operations and airline route decisions. All of these tie closely into the Eugene local economic situation. Airports are vital. There's a documentary out there called 16 Right. If you're interested in how airports impact, it focuses mostly on Van Nuys Airport and their impact to the, I don't remember the name of that valley right there, but the valley just north of LA. So it's also why we work very closely with Eugene Airport, the city of Eugene, and in return, the city of Eugene gives us an amazing deal on all of our airport facilities. Next slide. So I welcome all of you. If you'd like to come out to the airport, come take a tour. I give them all the time. I'm a little bit of a broken record player, but I make it fun and exciting. You come out and get a selfie in one of the private jets, check out all the amazing things that are going on. I know years ago, the board actually used to run some board meetings in the hangar. I've hinted to a few of you. I would love to do that again. I don't know. I don't see IT here today. They might hate me for saying that, but it'd be really an amazing opportunity. Thank you all so much for your time. And if there's any other questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
So that topic did come up. Any other questions? Lisa.
I don't have a question so much as a comment. So, excuse me. So pollen is starting to get to me, but when I first joined the board, I remember that this program was actually on the chopping block. It was being threatened. And I remember doing a bunch of calls with the previous president, Dr. Margaret Hamilton, to talk to people around the state and also at the federal level about investments that we could have for this program, because we recognized all the critical things that you've heard about today. And so I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's a really good example of how sometimes there can be a knee-jerk reaction to wanting to eliminate programs or cut things when we're facing difficult financial decisions. But clearly, these types of programs are investing in our community and also in the financial well-being of our future young generation. So I am just really happy you're still here.
Thank you.
And I know how important you are to the health of our community, particularly for having accessible airplane travel. We have many more flights here because of the program. And I am just thrilled also with the increase in the percentage of women in the program. So thank you very much for doing that work.
Absolutely. And thank you for that comment. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Zach?
I'd be happy to take you up on a tour. That sounds like a very fun time. With regards to the UAS program, the Northwest is sort of a leader in UAS systems, a lot of that being in the Columbia Gorge and Seattle area. What opportunities might there be here in Eugene to, business partnerships. You mentioned the idea that there's probably a future billionaire sitting in a garage. I wonder how we might help some of our students be the
Tap into some of those, right?
and have some spinoffs. If there are any opportunities, if you can just comment on business partnerships generally. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I can ask Solomon for some more fine details, and I can put those into one of our monthly board reports. He has been amazing at working with community partners, far above my expectations. So to give you an example, when the wildfires were coming down the McKenzie Valley, we actually went out and helped the local firefighters be able to look for hot spots, access terrain that would put firefighters at risk, those kind of things. We've done small projects with local agriculture. We have different types of systems and cameras that can go onto our drones. We can actually look at the root systems of plants and tell you how healthy your trees are. We've done video shots and things with Eugene Country Club, lots and lots of vendors. But we also have been able to do things with some of the contractors in Hood River, for example, that have given us access to equipment that normally a two-year college would never be able to afford. So I couldn't list everybody and tell you all the fine details tonight, but probably better than any of the three programs, it has an amazing support from the community and also providing a resource to the local community. So I'll get some more detailed information for you and provide that in a future board report.
Thank you.
And maybe some partnerships with the Small Business Development Center might be helpful, especially on the entrepreneurial side of things.
Love it.
If there's anything that we've learned recently, especially with doors flying off and so forth, the needs of aviation maintenance technicians and so forth. And I while you were presenting on that, I mean, we need to recruit, train, and hire 610 maintenance technicians between now and 2041. That's a huge need, and that does not include, retirements and so forth. And so there's parts of me that's like, wow, how can we scale up that specific part of the program as well? And I just wanted to kind of find out a little bit more about capacity currently and so forth.
Yeah. So the report I believe you pulled up is the Boeing outlook, the
yeah.
technician outlook.
Yep. Exactly.
I measure the industry in two ways. Department of Defense releases a report on how well they're able to fill their flight missions and how many missions that they can do. And then the Boeing report, which is a 20-year outlook.
Yeah.
They're quite dire, to be honest. Hundreds, if not thousands of aircraft were delayed or parked today because they don't either have a pilot or a maintenance personnel to get it back into the air. We are at capacity. The flight program has been taking 40 students per cohort. So about 80 students roughly that would be in the degree program itself. And then we have a handful of students that are here just to expand the skills that they already have. Our maintenance program gets to be a little bit more difficult. Our classroom sizes are fairly small, and we need to have a fairly small student to instructor ratio to maintain safety. So you can imagine we actually have students that are just feet away from spinning props and things in that program. It can get quite dangerous. And so having the right number of eyes on a student becomes very important. I'm not going to talk about it much tonight. Leadership is more than welcome, but I have been trying to advocate for new facilities at the airport. The truth is we have outgrown the facilities over the last couple of years. They've always fit our needs, and I love the relationship that we have with the Eugene Airport and what they provide for us. But I've already started some conversations with the airport in that direction. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Great presentation. All right. Next, we're going to be talking about the CTE Educator 1-Year Certificate Program. Dr. Folger?
Yes, we bring to the board for first reading tonight a new program, and it's the CTE Educator 1-Year Certificate. Turn that over to Dr. Tinkham.
Hello again. This certificate program is in response to a need expressed by our local K-12 partners and is designed to support industry experts as they move into teaching roles within middle and high school career technical education programs. With me tonight is Dean Phil Martinez. He's sitting right behind me. I'm going to invite him to the podium, and faculty Nadia Raza, who joins us on Zoom, and they are here tonight to provide you with an overview of the program.
Thank you, Chair Fulnagi, President Bulger, and the board for having us here. I'm going to do a very, very brief introduction and let Nadia talk through most of the issues, and I'll be available to answer questions that you may have as well. Just the structure of this program is that CTE teachers typically only require professional experience in an industry in order to be hired to teach. What that has shown over time is that they don't actually have any of the basic skills for actually running a classroom and teaching. So the state has created a licensure and an endorsement process in order to provide that training for current CTE teachers or anybody who wants to become a CTE teacher. And that structure has identified specific courses that need to be taught, outcomes, et cetera. And what this certificate does is it meets those standards. We were encouraged, invited, supported, not in a financial sense, but in a training sense, by Lane ESD and their employees in order to develop this certificate. And with that, I'll turn it over to our education coordinator and instructor, Nadia Rasa.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Hello, members of the board. It's an honor to offer you a glimpse of the education program and the CTE certificate. I do feel like it's a bit unfair to go after aviation. However, I'm really excited to share a glimpse of this work. I've been teaching at Lane for 19 years. I've additionally taught at the U of O and their College of Ed at Humboldt State University, and I've also taught at the Oregon State Penitentiary, but I'll share that for another time. And before I introduce you into the CTE certificate, I want to invite you into a glimpse of a class that I'm wrapping up. I imagine as a board member, one of the many challenges you face is being removed somewhat from the dynamic work of what happens in the classroom and the atmosphere where faculty are shaping and sharing curriculum to support our students in our ever-evolving society and times. I'm currently finishing a course called Ed 216, Historical Foundations of Education. It's an interdisciplinary course where it's part philosophy, part history, part sociology, and it invites students to really contemplate what I call this grand experiment of public education. To do this, we explore some of the most enduring questions that have originally shaped the institution and continue to shape it. For example, the class asks students to go into the minds of the architects of the modern school movement and think about the questions they were asking back in the 1890s when the institution began. Should education be patriotic? Should education assimilate students to particular values? If so, what values? Should education and how should education promote and uphold democracy? And these questions are so fascinating because they're absolutely relevant to the society we're living in today. I mean, today we are fiercely debating those questions in the public sphere, and they were debated as the institution began. In this class, we also spend some time talking about the role of democracy, and we spend some time talking about community colleges as really the people's colleges and, as I feel, one of the last bastions of democracy. Everybody is invited to participate, and we are constantly able to shift and pivot to the needs of our community. And this is where the CTE certificate actually comes in. This is a prime example of one of the ways that we are pivoting to create a new pathway for educators and responding to a dire need. As the summary that you received shows, there's quite a bit of context around the different organizations and partnerships that we are building with this certificate, but I really want to reduce it down to 3 critical needs that we are responding to. One is the need for teachers. As a lasting impact from COVID, there's a significant shortage of K through 12 teachers. The retirement wave, coupled with high attrition and turnover, and also subject-specific shortages, create a need for teachers throughout the state, throughout the country. And this certificate responds to that need. This certificate also grows a career technical opportunities in middle school and high schools by supporting a national movement to create more workforce development and respond to labor shortages, which we hear of a lot, and to also create pathways for diverse learners to get hands-on and practical skills. And this is one of the aspects of CTE education that I find really incredible, is that it supports young adults with self-efficacy and agency to take their education and their skills and apply it. And so this certificate supports the growth of CTE programs locally. And then the certificate also aligns with the state standards. The Oregon TSPC, Teachers Standards and Practices Commission. In the wake of COVID, they created multiple pathways for obtaining a teacher license. You may have heard of restricted license and conditional licenses, and one of them is a CTE pathway. And this certificate aligns with the state requirement for industry professionals to gain the necessary skills to translate their expertise and knowledge to a classroom setting. And Chemeketa and Clackamas Community College have identical programs to create and build this pathway across the state. I am a very visual learner, and I just want to give you a quick glimpse of what CTE looks like in our county. So in Bethel School District, Kalapuya High School is known for a very strong CTE program. They have built a youth build site where they are working to construct housing, tiny housing units for low income houseless individuals in our community, disabled veterans, and other underserved populations. I have a few images of what this program looks like. Here are students in that CTE program, one working on the tiny house build, one working in another CTE program that is doing agricultural work and farm to table growth of food. And when I show these images to future educators, middle school and high school students, they're astounded that this is what high school can look like, building homes and learning tangible skills. And this is just one of the ways that the certificate program you have in front of you kind of manifests in our community. Another way is there will be a showcase happening at Lane Community College. Lane ESD is putting together a student showcase on May 8th. I will make sure that you all have an invitation to this. It'll be in the center building, and students from across the county will demonstrate what they are learning. I attended last year and it was astounding. It changed the way that I looked at CTE programs and really of high school education overall. And so I'd love to see some of you there if you're able to attend. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the certificate program.
Any questions? Lisa?
Yeah, so thank you, Nadia. That was really informative. So is this one-year certificate actually a pathway to licensure for the educators that are working on it?
Absolutely. So the Oregon TSPC board laid out this pathway as a way to track industry professionals into teaching.
That is very exciting. Thank you.
Excellent. Any further questions? Just a comment that, CTE and these skills that these professionals will bring to the students and having the certification to bring to the students is really critical within our labor force. It's really critical within passing along skills that are passed, that have been developed through generations. And, we always hear, bring back woodshop back into their schools and stuff like that. This is how we do it. And I really appreciate both of you for this presentation. I look forward to seeing this in front of the board next time for approval. Thank you. Oh, Lisa.
So this is the first read, right?
Oh, yeah. First read. Yeah.
So I just was wondering if we will be moving it to the consent agenda at our next meeting, or if we will actually have it again on the agenda.
My understanding is we were going to have it on the consent agenda, but if we want it as for further discussion, we can put it to the regular part of the agenda. But my understanding is we'd put it in the consent agenda, and by doing that, we can always pull it out of there so we can have further discussion. But yeah, I think it's listed for the consent. All right, seeing no further questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next is in regards to board policy updates. And Dr. Bulger, I believe there's a removal on this one as well. Excellent. Dr. Bulger.
Yes, I want to just let the board know that there's one of the policies that I want to pull. I've had a conversation with the chair of the college council, and there is a need for a bit more discussion about this particular policy. And it is, I'll ask Brett to give us the board policy number and what the title of that policy.
It's Board Policy 5140. The proposed title is programs, accessibility, support, and services.
So we certainly appreciate the good work that's been done so far. We just need a little bit of additional discussion before bringing it to the board. So thank you.
Excellent. All right.
And Brett, we'll complete the work of this particular item. This is also a first read for the board policies.
Perfect.
Some of you may remember when I used to bring board policies to you. Get to bring a handful of them this evening. We'll start with the first two regarding procurement policies for the college, board policies 6340 and board policy 255. And this is really a decision for you all to make whether you want to move forward with it. The state has updated the state laws around the value amount of contracts that need to receive approval by governing bodies. What you have before you is a proposal to adjust the two board policies that deal with the value of contracts that need to come to the board for approval. This is just following what the changes that other state bodies are making. Other community college boards are considering this decision. Last month, Umpqua Community College revised their procurement policies to increase from $150,000 to $250,000 as the threshold that requires board approval. This was done because the state hadn't adjusted that figure in quite some time. And by that, when you add in all of the inflationary growth of contracts over the years, it just kind of moved it to a higher figure. But as far as making sure that the policies follow the laws in place around procurement and all of the other policies that you've put in place, such as going out for bids and things like that, those all stay in place. What you have before you in these two policies would just change the threshold from $150,000 to $250,000.
Absolutely. Just to clarify, so essentially the state has given us this bump up to that amount, but us as a board can decide whether if it's 250, 199,000, whatever the number we want the board it to be, we as a board decide, but it can be up to 250.
Well, and I was incorrect. Umpqua actually went higher. They went to 350,000 for their policies. They did that last month, February 14th. But the recommendation from Michael Blade in these policies, if you want to kind of match what other state bodies are doing in their adjustments, they're going from 150 to 250.
Understood. Thank you. Mike, then Steve.
I know that other board members serve on other boards. And I'd be interested to hear your experience. My experience on other boards is that we have raised it to the state level. And on at least two other boards that I'm familiar with.
Excellent. Steve?
Yeah. When I was on the EWEB board, this is some time ago, a similar issue for similar reasons, I think, came to the board. And, basically a compromise was struck. There were some board members who were supportive. Let's do that. We trust our staff. There was others who felt they wanted to have some, maintain some of the control that was established with the lower threshold. The compromise was to increase the threshold, but also to request from staff. And I don't remember if it was annual or quarterly anymore. I think it was annual report of all, just a summary report of the contracts that were passed up to that threshold, so that folks could see and gain trust and confidence over time at the kinds of things that previously would have come to the board, but because of the change, no longer did. So that was the compromise that was struck, and it seemed to work pretty well. And I might advocate that again this time.
What was the state's? What was the exact amount that the state said that we could raise it to?
I don't have it in front of me. I believe, well, I would have to do some digging, but I believe Mike put it as a reference in the board tax policy, which state statute is relevant. So I'd have to look that up.
Okay. Lisa?
I'm supportive of the change to 250,000. I mean, a lot of these expenses have increased and we probably look back over time. But I'm also supportive of the idea that Steve floated and would be interested in seeing something like that as well.
Wonderful. Denise.
Yes, I was going to express my support for the compromise that Steve articulated a few moments ago because of the diligence that we are practicing and need to practice in regards to our budgetary needs. And I think that that's a good compromise.
Absolutely. Yeah, in full support of seeing just examples of what we've passed. Probably in the last how far back did they go? Was it like a 4-year time period, or when you were on the eWeb board, they gave examples of ones that would have
No, they didn't go back.
Oh,
They just said from that, once the board had made the decision to raise the threshold, it wasn't, I don't remember what the numbers were,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
in this case, 150 to 250, the board said, would you please show us a list of all the contracts that were passed between the 150 and the 250 threshold so that we
Yeah.
can get a feel for the things that we are missing by raising this threshold.
Understood. Great. Yeah, something like that would be a great help, I believe, toward the board. So,
Okay, and if the board would like, we can add that language to the policy before it's brought back. Okay,
excellent. Seeing some thumbs up on that one. Yeah.
great. There are 4 more policies in the packet. All of these have very minor changes to them based off of changes in state statute over the past 2 years. This is one of the benefits of using the OCCA policy library. Is twice a year they provide to the colleges updates for policies that need to have small tweaks. The first one of the 4 is Board Policy 2315, dealing with closed and executive sessions. It adds language. There are 2 new areas that the board is able to meet an executive closed session over. One is pertaining to cybersecurity, and the other is dealing with safety of board staff, volunteers, basically safety on campus. So this would adjust the language of that board policy to include those new areas that you can call an executive session over. Would you like me just to go through the last 3 and if there's
Absolutely.
any questions?
Yes, thank you.
The next is Board Policy 2716, dealing with Board of Education political activity. This is a slight change thanks to Senate Bill 168 that was passed during the 23 session, and it just clarifies when public officials are prohibited from engaging in political activity. It's a little more specific than the way the policy was written.
Yep.
Board Policy 2720, which deals with communication among board members. This is a slight change based off of House Bill 2805, also passed during the 23 session. And this just clarifies that there are certain forms of communication that you can have with one another that is okay and allowed under law. And so it's a little more specific about what is and is not allowed.
Mike.
So I wonder about the wisdom of, instead of repeating the language from legislation, if we just referred to the legislation so that as that legislation changes, our board policy is automatically updated.
I guess maybe I don't fully understand your question. I think every time we change a board policy, it takes an action from the board. So you would be required to go in and take.
Well, if the board policy was to mirror state policy, then when the state policy changes, the board policy change would automatically change to be congruent with the state.
Okay, I think one of the challenges with that is that the state doesn't provide us with updated language for our policies when it passes a new law. So sometimes you may want to tweak the language that's proposed for adjusting those board policies. I think I see where you're going.
Yeah.
Anytime that the state changes a law, we can just go ahead and do that. But I also think that if you had a legal counsel here, he would probably tell you that you need to look at the language and take a vote on the specific language.
There may be a reason to do that, just in terms of the specificity and for training purposes, professional development for the board members as well.
Absolutely.
But this is one of the, all 4 of these recommendations. There's one more policy that I'll get to here in a minute, but all of these are similar to like what you were referencing. When new state laws are passed, OCCA provides us with the list of suggested changes with language that's been vetted by attorneys for us to use if you all decide to do so to update our policies.
Excellent. Kevin had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, Brett, specifically on board policy 2720, it would be helpful for me if you could give some kind of concrete examples of what the additional language is addressing. I kind of get the idea, but I'd like to have a better idea about where the line is and how not to cross it.
Okay. And it's all right if I provide that to you at the next meeting?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thanks.
I'd say right here on the fly.
I did watch a lot of LA Law and Night Court as a kid, so I have some legal background.
Oh, yeah. Any further questions before we move on to the last one? Nope, go ahead.
All right, the final policy is Board Policy 3515, reporting of crimes. And this clarifies the language. This clarifies and makes the language more similar to what is being asked for in the Federal Clery Act as far as what our reporting requirements are. So it just more mirrors the federal language.
All right, any questions about this one? Seeing none. We got it. Yep, go ahead. Oh, Mike,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, as far as I'm concerned, these can all go on the consent agenda next time.
Absolutely. I'm open to that as well. Just a really quick clarifying question in regards to BP 5140. Is that it? Was it College Council that needed to go through? So it was a College Council that didn't have a chance to review it, or?
There just needs to be a bit more discussion. I've conferred with the chair of the College Council.
Gotcha.
Just a bit more discussion on that particular policy. We'll bring that back.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Moving on to the deferred maintenance investment discussion. President Bulger.
Great, thank you. I'll ask Jennifer Hayward to come to the podium and have a discussion with the board about deferred maintenance. Certainly, this is a topic that's come up before, and the information that you have in front of you and that was sent to Trustee Diamond as well, that information may be referred to by Jennifer. And so I want Jennifer for you to know that they do have the responses that you gave to Trustee Mulholland.
Thank you. Brett's pulling it. Oh, thank you.
Perfect.
Next slide. I'm going to talk about deferred maintenance in 5 different categories: athletic fields, parking lots and roads, site, which mostly means exterior pathways and handrails, infrastructure, which includes things like central heating and cooling plant and electrical wire and water pipes that run between buildings, and then building related deferred maintenance. Athletic fields, deferred maintenance is pretty good news. The 2020 bond took care of about 2/3 of it for the next 10 years, the track and the soccer areas. The one area of deferred maintenance remaining is the baseball field, and we do have an estimate for revamping that of about $2.8 million. That is on the list of bond projects that the cabinet is considering bringing forth to you in June. Parking lots and roads. In 2018, we had an engineer do a 10-year maintenance plan for parking lots and roads, and they recommended an investment of $250,000 per year to maintain parking lots. And I'm not expecting you to read, this is just a screenshot to give you an idea of what the maintenance plan looks like. Next slide. So like I said, the recommended annual investment was $250,000 a year, which now with inflation equates to $300,000 a year. And the 6-year average annual investment that we've made since then is $193,000, so a little bit less than recommended. And the bond has contributed, as you see, to the maintenance that we've done there. And also we have a transportation fee where we charge students $27 per term, credit students, and that $18.90 of that goes to pay for the group bus pass, and most of the rest of it goes towards funding transport parking lot maintenance. That fee isn't quite keeping up with the deferred or with the maintenance need for parking lots, so we may want to consider increasing that fee in the future, something to think about. The next category is site. One of the big things with site that we know about is I had a structural study conducted of the exterior pathways around the second level of the center building, which you can kind of see from this vantage point. And it's recommending $1.5 million, about $1.5 million in structural repairs to that walkway system. That's also on the list along with baseball field of the potentially proposed bond projects that we'll be bringing to you in June. And then for the rest of the site, for most of the rest of it, we need to conduct a comprehensive assessment to get an idea of the maintenance need that hasn't been done yet. You see a couple pictures of additional things that I know about, but I don't have my arms quite wrapped around it. So as we're preparing for a future bond, that's something that I'll want to have done. Infrastructure is the next one. That include, like I said, that includes things like the central heating and cooling plant. A couple known needs are replacing the 1960s era electrical feeder wire that goes from the main campus transformers in building 12 and out to all of the buildings. And the approximate estimate for that is about $2 million. Another one is replacing our 25-year-old boiler and some expansion tanks, project about $3 million. But similar to site, I need to have conducted another comprehensive assessment to get our arms wrapped around a budget number and all of the needs for that. So infrastructure, need to do a little more research on that one too. Next. Building related deferred maintenance is one that I have a lot better handle on. We had a comprehensive facilities conditions assessment conducted on building related deferred maintenance in 2017. And we'll dive into that in the next few slides, but that just includes everything that has to do with the building. So the roofs, the fire systems, the elevators, HVAC, all of that stuff. Like I said, the comprehensive facilities conditions assessment that was conducted in 2017 showed that we have a deferred maintenance backlog of about $44 million in that year. And it has increased since then. The bond has contributed to keeping it lower than it would be otherwise, but not enough to keep it level or make it go down, unfortunately. Next slide. These are the list of building related deferred maintenance items that have been completed over the last 6 or so years since the study was conducted. And I won't read this off, I'll just pause for a second, but it shows the funding source and the amount for each item. Go ahead, I guess, yeah. People have seen these slides in advance. A few upcoming projects that will further decrease deferred maintenance are the Cottage Grove, the South Lane Clinic project will be replacing the roof and the HVAC systems in that building. The Building 16 bond project will make a real significant dent in deferred maintenance for that building. And then the demolition of Building 12 that's being done in conjunction with the construction of the new Industry Trades Education Center building will also knock out some deferred maintenance. Next slide. So industry standard recommendation is to invest 2 to 4% of the current replacement value of buildings into deferred maintenance. And our current replacement value is about $700 million. So a 2 to 4% investment would be about $14 to $28 million per year in deferred maintenance. And this chart, and there's a graph on the next page, but it shows kind of the trajectory of our deferred maintenance backlog with at varying investment levels. One would be with those additional bond investments only, you're still seeing an increase with the bond plus the $500,000 that's proposed in this year's budget for deferred maintenance, you know, still increasing. And I won't read off all of it, but as you can see, it only starts to decrease when we're making that industry standard 2 to 4% investment. Next slide. And this just is a kind of a graphical representation of what I just said. Thanks. So just a summary, these are, I've talked about deferred maintenance in 5 different categories, and the bond contributed in each of those categories. So this is just a summary of all of the contributions that the bond made to reducing deferred maintenance, with a total of $40 million.
So that means 40 million was covered by the bond?
Mhm.
Wow.
Zach?
Of the current 89 million backlog, is some of that going to be paid for by what's listed on the bottom here?
Yes.
So there's another 24-ish million that's going to come off of that
Yeah.
89 million number.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of had a question, which was in regards to the $7.8 million, because I was trying to remember the numbers we were looking at to rehabbing building 12, and I remember it was like significantly more than 7.8. Are we well, I mean, there's parts of me that wants to say that has an impact on deferred maintenance to a certain degree, but at least in the calculation.
I'm gonna stand up.
Yes.
Yeah, when we were looking at renovating the building, it
Yep.
would have been replacing the roof,
Yep.
fixing the structure,
Yep.
replacing electrical systems. When we changed directions,
Yep.
built a new building, our approach now is to take that old roof, the structure, the electrical systems, and get rid of them. So that takes away deferred maintenance and keeps us to having to repair them in the future. So
Absolutely.
that's how we come up with that 7.8.
Oh, so it's included in there. Okay.
It is one of those,
Got it.
part of
10
that other question of where that other 20 million,
Fantastic.
it's still sitting there. So it's still a deferred maintenance piece on our books.
Understood. Thank you so
Hopefully, in
much.
about 2 years, it'll be away.
Exactly. Yep. Appreciate the clarification on that. Thank you.
And then I also just wanted to let you know that in 2019, a couple of years after I had that comprehensive assessment done, I created a 15-year deferred maintenance plan using a budget of $2.5 million a year, a major maintenance allocation. And this, again, isn't for you to look at or read. It's just a screenshot to show you what the plan looks like. And there's a tab for every year. And we have to update it every year depending on what the budget ends up being. But just wanted to let you know there is a 15-year plan.
Good.
So some ideas to getting us up to the funding levels we need are to look at other Oregon community colleges, how they do it, how they're making it work. LCC does have the lowest plant operations and maintenance budget of any of the 6 largest Oregon community colleges, and that shows the 6 and the % of their total budget that is dedicated to plant operations and maintenance.
That's this year, that's a rolling average?
That was for the FY24 adopted budget.
When we had 0.
Yeah, when we had 0, but it also includes things like our operations and maintenance staff and stuff like that. So one idea, is to start with the 550 deferred maintenance budget that is proposed for 2025 and to increase it until we get to being more on par with our Oregon peers. That's the last slide.
Understood. Any questions? Steve?
To the second to the last slide, Jennifer, when you have time I think some kind of like, I don't know, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, I get that the longer I ask it, the more work it is, but some kind of an average across those institutions, because that one particular data point might be a low point for us, a high point for them.
Sure.
But if we could see what it looks like over some.
That makes sense.
horizon,
Yeah.
I think would be useful.
Yeah. Lisa?
Yeah, I was just curious. You said there were a lot of variables around the parking lots and roads. And you were saying we needed to do about 300,000 per year, but that then there was stuff coming in from bond, transportation, 6-year average of 193. Are we meeting that 300 or?
No,
Yeah.
but we're a lot closer to meeting that than we are with the buildings. So we're doing a bit better with parking lots and roads.
Yep. Go ahead, Liz.
So I'm really curious. I know we've been talking about for a while, having some type of analysis of the use of our space. And it seems like there are some buildings on campus that are significantly underutilized. And so I'm curious, what is the interface between our use of space and how we think about where we invest dollars for deferred maintenance?
Yes, that is a very important consideration. For example, building 17, you can
Yeah.
see straight out there is a very underutilized building, and it has not, and that's the reason why we haven't been investing deferred maintenance dollars in it. It's one of the most poorly maintained buildings on campus. And so, I mean, we do definitely take that into consideration, and that space utilization study is under contract, and we are getting started on that.
And wasn't building 17 one that was identified for demolition in the infrastructure, long-term infrastructure plan?
And the facilities master plan. We didn't include it in the 2009 bond or 2020 bond voters pamphlet. I think the thought was that maybe it wasn't a wow factor project that would get community votes as much as other projects, which I can understand, but it is in the master plan.
Denise?
Thank you. I'm just curious why, what is the thinking behind a 15-year plan? How does one come up with 15 years out?
As opposed to like a 3 or 5 year plan, is that what
Well,
you're?
yeah, or not even more than 10 because conditions and finances and state budget, well, there's just too many unknown factors.
You're right. It might have been a little bit overkill on my part, but I feel like Tom wants to say something about it.
I think a lot of it comes from 15 because there's a life cycle of parts of a building. You know, if you go 5 years, great. The carpet might wear out in 7 years. So if you're thinking 5 years, you get to 10 years, you start to include some of the other systems. Heating and ventilation system or electrical system is a 20 to 25 year life cycle. So you want to look ahead at that point and have that rolling cycle. So if you're doing too short of a cycle, you'll not catch all of those things. It's if you only look at changing your oil every 3 months in your car, you forget about the timing belt, the other big picture of what's going to go wrong. So I think that's why you have to continue to look at a long-term time frame.
Thanks.
Zach, and then I'll put myself in the queue.
Is it possible to pull up the 2024 matrix?
Yeah, I logged into the Zoom, so I think I can pull it up myself.
Okay. Just as she pulls up, just to recognize that as we look out over a longer term time frame, I think the matrix that'll get pulled up goes out to 2033. We have some really big ticket items that are going to start coming up around 2027, 2028 that we need to fund that we do not we have not pre-funded. And so it looks like 2027, there's a $26 million update to half of that's plumbing, it looks like. That if we do nothing, our needs are going to grow to about $180 million backlog by if you scroll down a little bit. So 171 million will be the backlog in 10 years if we don't change something. So definitely recognizing this is a major issue. And I look forward to working with the board and the staff over the coming years to get on the right track with this so we can make sure that we are slowly but surely paying this down rather than having continue to increase and that we can hopefully look out further. And eventually we can start pre-funding this stuff instead of being in a massive, massive backlog. Thank you.
Understood. The boiler. So are we looking at natural gas with the boiler, or is it going to be electric? And then what is the cost differential between those two?
we would definitely look at all of the options and electric is more expensive. Natural gas is getting more expensive with the climate protection program law now in Oregon. Do you want to chime in?
Well, I would like to, because I think that's one of the unique things about deferred maintenance is when you do that study, it says that door operator is going to fall apart in X number of years.
Yeah.
And it's going to replace it with that door operator or that doorknob. It doesn't talk about, gee, there's better technology out there. We want electric door operators on here. That's not included in it that might happen.
Gotcha.
So it's all of those other things that come along with it, which is another deceiving point that the cost is probably much higher even now.
Yeah.
Because there are those things that I hate to say they're while you're at it, but are you putting back exactly what's there? And is that the right decision? I think Florence was a good example of that. There are a lot of things that we could have just replaced exactly what was there, but we upgraded building systems. We changed lighting to LED lights rather than putting back in fluorescents. Higher cost, but a good investment. So I think that's part of where Jennifer says we need these studies. It is a big part of it. We need to keep up on these and look at the bigger picture.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for indicating that's more expensive. Because I remember when we were doing the analysis of becoming a greener campus, I think it was we were talking about like, so what if we became completely like fossil fuel, like we took out all fossil fuel, it wouldn't increase our score substantially that much. There was other things that we could be doing to reduce our carbon footprint in that area. So yeah, this is one of those interesting conversations that I'm like trying to go into my head. Where is that, sustainability, environmental policy, as well as the functionality of the facilities and so forth. And the boiler room is one of those areas where I've been like really thinking on like, okay, is this possible to go without fossil fuels? And yeah, anyway.
Jennifer, are you thinking about, generating some kind of are you thinking about generating a staff recommendation as to where you think the proper level of investment, you on behalf of the institution, think the proper level of investment is going to be? Or I guess what I'm getting at is that's what I would like to see, as opposed to us sort of telling you first, here's how much we think we can afford, and then you make do with it. I would rather have the conversation start at least the other direction. Here's what you think the institution needs, and then we have to wrestle with how to pay for it.
I will work with the new VPFO and bring that to you soon.
Excellent. Zach?
If I recall correctly, I think you shared a report with me from a couple of years ago that was a presentation to the board where the recommendation was to get up to, I believe, 6 million a year in addition to the bond funding.
That sounds about 5 or 6, I think, is what I said in that presentation. But yeah, I would want to revisit that with the new finance staff and
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we're over time, but go ahead.
Just one last comment. I don't think this undermines the thing I just said, but it might. I just want to say as a starting point for discussion, I think what you have at least demonstrated to me is that our $500,000 a year sort of roughly, annual contribution is not going to cut it. And it really is incumbent on the board to think through how to significantly increase that so that, we keep this a beautiful, safe, environmental campus. And so exactly how much it's going to be, I don't think it's for us to tell you. It's really for you to tell us. But I think the writing is on the wall that the investment we've had to date is insufficient.
Yeah. Yes.
Understood. All right. Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. Appreciate it. And more discussion to come. All right. We're going to move on to the composite financial index and the 3-year financial plan. Dr. Bolger.
Yes, John Nisbet, he's on Zoom, and he is going to talk about the composite financial index, the score that he has generated with others in the finance office, and then the 3-year financial plan. And he'll give some background. He'll remind the board of why he's bringing this particular 3-year financial plan back to the board. So, John.
Sure. Well, thank you. Board members, good evening. As the board deck draws up here, I'll just make some initial comments. So first of all, the forecast is really just to put some of the context of the work we've done with the FY25 budget into the broader of what we've developed as this framework in the budget office toward, a 3-year or a 5-year timeline. And so in the next slide here, not much has changed on the second page with regard to all the variables that we've spoken about, agreement and discussion with the Budget Development Subcommittee and College Council on enrollment targets, on tuition increases that we've discussed previously, things like this. So really nothing new here. So if we go to the next slide, what I did was take some of the current thinking and the great work with the Budget Development Subcommittee and College Council that met last week on the FY25 budget, and to say, put it in kind of a one-pager that says, here's what FY24 was when we began with about a $7.5 million ending fund balance. And we're projecting through the year now to generate between $0 and $1 million of surplus. And that moves around a little bit with some large expenditures at the end of the year. Jonathan Campbell, who is our budget director, had presented to you in January about our year-to-date financials. And we intend to update you again after Q3 here at the end of March. So this is still, we think, on track to have a balanced budget for FY24, still moving in that direction pretty successfully. So if this were true right here with $1 million, we would be, let's say, between 7.5 to 8.5 million for an ending fund balance. So that's where we would start for then our FY25 fiscal year. And so a lot of great conversation, as I mentioned, with the subcommittee, College Council, and feedback from all of you, of course, on all the elements that are building the 25 budget. And so what this demonstrates here is, high level, these are the major buckets of revenue and expenses that go into the budget. And a couple comments I'll make on this essentially generate for us a balanced budget. So at the end of the year, we feel pretty comfortable that we can achieve a 9% ending fund balance. And then in 26 would continue that work through the year and get to a 10%. And really that's the main goal of demonstrating this or showing you this version of a framework, is to say, we have a model that gets us to a 10% ending fund balance, either at the end of 25, more likely 26, with a couple things. One is state support is still an uncertainty in 26. So in the next biennium, what I modeled here is 7% growth in the state support. So in the last two biennium, we've seen 9% and 13% growth in CCSF. And so by modestly putting 7% in, feel pretty comfortable we can hit 10% for our ending fund balance. The other thing that I would just highlight in here, if you note on personnel services, you'll see the FY25 budget is 82.1 million. And then in FY26, it's 82.9. You might wonder, how is that? Well, there are some nuances between forecast and budget. And one of the big ones is vacancy or swirl. So when we develop a budget, we have to budget for everybody that's on campus. We have to budget for all the positions. So if every single position were filled for the entire year during FY25, 82.1 million, we can still achieve 9%. I say this because there's a silver lining to it that says, well, there's normally this, the term swirl that you've heard before, this 2.5 or 3% that we've discussed. We know that retirements occur and people turn over. And if that's the case, then you'll see less than 82.1 million expense within the year for personnel services. But we always budget for who's in the seats today. So, and then 82.9 for FY26 goes back to a forecast. So we include swirl in that. So there's a little bit of different variability between budget and forecast. And by and large, primarily the biggest difference is vacancy, because you always budget who you have, and then you can forecast who you might not have. So that's just a distinction I want to make for you here. But nonetheless, the main message to this is simply to say, I think there's been great work with the subcommittee and College Council. I think we've settled on a balanced budget for 25. We can achieve 9% in this coming year and 10% thereafter. So let me pause there. Are there any questions for that first?
Excellent. We got a question from Lisa.
Yeah, I was curious where you landed on the Fund 9, because we had discussed at our last meeting, decreasing the amount after we realized a little bit of what that amount actually would be. And so it's looking like we're going to spread it over 5 years. So how much is the amount
Indeed.
going each year? To
Correct.
9?
You're right. And thank you. That on page 2, that was one of the changed items. Similar theme anyway, but we spread it over 5 years. And so instead of being, what was it, 1.6 million previously over 3 years, it's now 1.15, I believe, over 5 years. And what that includes is not only backfilling the deficit, but also continuing the normal operating spend over the 5 years.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification.
Go ahead.
So I was also curious about the 3.5% enrollment. And I just wanted clarification around, we discussed an aspirational enrollment of 5%, but we're budgeting at 3.5. And so I just was wondering what that means in terms of accountability.
Yeah, that's correct. So 3.5% would be the budgeted enrollment. So let's say we came in at 7% in the fall and 7% for winter and spring. We'd have that extra 3.5% to then determine how to allocate that. Much like we did this year with additional state support, we would come back to the board and say, we'd like to recognize this additional revenue and allocate that to X. So if that's true, then that's fantastic. I think 3.5% is certainly achievable, and we cover it at least 1.5% of that with the reserve for revenue shortfall. So we have a cushion for it as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So John, we just talked about deferred maintenance.
Yeah.
Did you bump the contribution to deferred maintenance in these assumptions or no?
No, actually for 26, we didn't increase it further. However, I do think there's a couple areas that I think it's possible. So number one is enrollment. So if enrollment exceeds 3.5%, I think you have perhaps a story to tell on the deferred maintenance and getting more allocation to those areas. And the other is the state support. So if we come in for FY26 at 7% modeled here, and if, for instance, we're going to hit 10% reasonably, and we can recognize, let's say state support comes in at 12% or 10 or 11, over 7 anyway, it gives us a surplus. The board has the ability then to recognize that additional revenue and allocate it to X. So I think there's opportunity there.
Perfect. Zach?
On the Fund 9, so this budget does have about $1 million in FY24 going into the Fund 9 rebalancing.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. In terms of, seems that we have some sort of competing priorities, restoring the ending fund balance, refilling Fund 9, having the reserve for revenue shortfall, deferred maintenance. I guess, how do you balance maybe the first two? I guess my question is, would it make sense for us to front load repaying back the refilling the ending fund balance and, so maybe putting all of the money from the first year into that and then putting additional monies in years 2 through 5 into refilling Fund 9? I guess I'm wondering, would it make sense to really try and restore the ending fund balance sooner by shifting monies that first year and then making it up in years 2 through 5?
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent question, because I think it does lead toward, some of the CFI content. And some of the variables that impact the CFI ratio are expendable net assets, which basically means the more cash that you have, or by achieving the 10% ending fund balance, that puts you in a better position than with scores and CFI scores, things like that. So yes, I would agree. My recommendation would be try to make up, number one, the ending fund balance and cash balances within the college by paying back Fund 9. You bolster those sub-fund balances, so you'd have more expendable net assets within the college. That would be number one. And then number two would be deferred maintenance. And the way that plays in, this is kind of a complicated conversation, and I kind of weigh whether or not to get into it, but a couple of the ratios depend a lot on property, plant, equipment, and depreciation. So the more that you're able to have a pristine campus, the better off some of those ratios will look, put it, succinctly. So I think that's an important piece of it as well. And like you said, if these are competing priorities, so there's going to be lots of things that we might prefer to put the funds toward once you recognize additional revenue. But at least some initial thoughts. I'll stop there.
Gotcha. So essentially you put more money into updating the kitchen, your house value goes up.
Exactly.
Exactly. Excellent. We'll go Denise.
Well, in relationship to the conversation that we've been having on the deferred maintenance, which certainly seems to take a very big priority, this is a 3-year forecast. Wouldn't we really need to try and make it a 5-year? I mean, they're doing a 15-year, which maybe is more years than needed. That's just an opinion. But I mean, we have to align. We have to come to some kind of an alignment, right, in order to really see the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we have a framework that does model the next 5 years. And every year that passes, I think we'll probably add another year to maintain the rolling 5-year forecast. And to your point, my experience has been I've done 10-year operating plans to match with a 10-year campaign or a 10-year capital plan and things like that. And sometimes it gets a little squirrely because it's very difficult to project operating, 7-8 years out. But I think it's useful to have the framework to do so. And I think a 5-year that I said, we have the framework, of course, and I shared that with you in December. I just wanted to highlight here anyway that we can achieve a 10% within the next couple of years. This year, 25 or 26, or certainly by the end of 26, being that that's board policy. But you're absolutely right. I think we also, with this 5-year framework, we're able to factor in many other different facets like deferred maintenance.
Absolutely. Yeah. Steve?
John, would you just remind us, or me at least, the rationale for establishing 10% as the ending fund balance?
Yeah. So largely, my experience with it in the 5 months I've been here is that it's board policy. And I really don't have much to go on in terms of why it's 10%, not 5% or some other figure. I think having a reserve makes a lot of sense. In fact, I've had a lot of conversations around strategic reserves at different universities. So I don't know that 10% is a magical number that makes any more sense than something else. At some places, it's 3% or 5%. And it depends on the variability or the volatility rather at the college. So if you see very, consistent, predictable enrollment, you could probably envision reducing that to some extent. But those are just my initial thoughts on it.
Good. So you're kind of coming right to the place where I was, like in the last bunch of years, right, where our trend was downward enrollment. You could imagine in those years, we would say we should have a higher ending fund balance. And in a sense, we did, at least last year, because we added, I've forgotten the name for it, but the
Reserve for revenue.
thank you. The right. And when you start to have confidence that you're in an upward trend, I can imagine, resetting the ending fund balance. And, whether we're confidently in an upward trend at this point in time or not is debatable. But I just put that out there for other board members to consider. I don't know what the right number is, but you at least have reminded us that it's arbitrary. We certainly could take advantage of and find out what other institutions are doing. We could look at our burn rate. There's a bunch of things that we should probably review over time to help us as a board understand why that target is as it is and when it makes sense to adjust it.
All right. Kevin hasn't had a chance to speak, so I'll go to Kevin.
Absolutely.
What's up? Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I think I remember reading that the 10% was based on an X number of months being able to pay our bills. And I think it was either 3 or 6 months. I might be misremembering that, but I think it's somewhere. That was the basis of the 10%.
Excellent. Lisa, then
right.
Denise. Lisa, then Denise, and then I'll put myself in the queue.
Yeah, I think the number's arbitrary as well. And actually, when I first joined the board, there was a really big conversation about decreasing that amount, that it it wasn't at that time reflecting what I'd heard other community colleges had. So I'd love to know what other institutions are doing. Because sometimes it feels like we set this arbitrary number and we get penalized for it. So I'd like to have a good understanding, like about the comment that Kevin made, is that accurate? And also what other community colleges are. And also really appreciate the thinking that Steve offered about it. Maybe it does make sense for it to reflect where we're trending in terms of our enrollment and saving more in years when it's more challenging.
Denise?
Well, in that conversation, I'm just wondering, is there a state guideline on it that it cannot be less than?
Not yet, at least.
Yeah, there is a policy that indicates we do need to maintain an unappropriated ending fund balance of 3%. So we
Okay.
do that separately.
That's from the state? Oh, it is. Oh, my apologies. Steve?
Yeah, but I agree, as somebody at least partially responsible for kicking this conversation off, that it's worth reviewing on some kind of basis. And I also just want to put out there that I'm not necessarily advocating for, a drastic change or reduction. It's easy to revise it down. It's hard to revise it up, and there will come times when we want to revise it up. And I think generally, so that's a concern. Just, if we revise it down, it's hard when we need to do otherwise. And generally speaking, given our responsibilities as fiduciaries, I feel I just want to say I end up by erring further on the side of caution than I might otherwise do. And I think that's part of our responsibility. And despite all of that, it makes sense to review the numbers once in a while and see if there's opportunity.
Absolutely. And I'll just speak for myself in that I'm in complete favor of changing that number. Having been on another institutions board at Klamath Community College and seeing we had a really robust savings essentially in that institution. And I see this as an opportunity to reinvest these funds into our institution. So I'm totally in favor of this on a multitude of reasons. If you were to ask me as a board member, would I cut programs or change this number? I would change this number. If it was to reinvest into our institution and our infrastructure, I would change this number. There's a lot of things, quite frankly, that I would rather fund than to keep this number at 10%. So yeah, I look forward, if the board would like to have that discussion, I'd be in complete favor of that. And yeah, I'll just state that. Zach?
So I don't know if we can do anything this year in terms of moving some numbers to try and restore the fund balance this year, in terms of reserves and replenishing Fund 9, if we can, front load that, but that's something I would be potentially interested in if it would actually help our CFI calculation. And then it seems like, we're hoping for additional revenues in the future. We have a lot of needs. It might be worth having a conversation about how we would want to prioritize potential new funds. Because then otherwise, when new funds do become available, I'm sure there will be lots of bright, shiny objects we would love to fund with that money. So it might be worth a longer conversation with the board about what some of these long-term funding priorities really should be with any additional dollars that come in. Thanks.
Agreed. Steve?
Just to change the subject a little bit. Actually, maybe one final point on this, that just to remind ourselves, we're not talking about a lot of money, right? Right now it's at 10%, and that leaves us some, close to $10 million. And if we revised it down to 6% and that felt dangerous, well, what did that do for us? That gave us, a few $1 million in 1 year, essentially, right, to spend. So it's not, we don't want to get overly hung up on this particular issue. That's not the other point I wanted to make is really as a thank you, both to John, and I assume Sue had a lot to do this before you took over, John. This is this is my third time going through the budget cycle, and by far this is the most opportunity that the board has been afforded to participate in the process as it developed and weigh in at important opportunities, like with the tuition recommendation last time that we met and other kinds of opportunities like that, so that we can feel at the end that we're not just here to rubber stamp at a time when there's nothing left to do but say, okay, I guess so, where we participated all along and are invested in it. So thank you for that. Thank you for giving us the 3-year outlook. And I just want to encourage that we continue in this kind of way so that the board does have this level of engagement in years to come.
Well, thank you.
Excellent. We're at time, but is there more to the presentation, John?
Just two slides.
Fantastic. Yeah, let's give the amount of time for the presentation. Go ahead, John.
Okay, so let's go to the next. So the CFI update is essentially the similar content that you saw last spring with consultants showed the report from 2018 to 22 as a 5-year period of time. The CFI is this big, complicated group of calculations of 4 sets of ratios that essentially assess overall financial health of an institution. It was developed a couple decades ago by, I can't remember if it's Department of Ed or NACUBO, National Association of College and University Business Officers. Essentially, it is something that's widely used across every institution. Big 4 accounting firms use it, things like that. So categorically, where we are today, what you saw with the 23 audit, the financial statements, and this is a little backwards, but wanted to signal to you what CFI calculation update was first. In the next board meeting, the auditor was going to review the audit with you for FY23 and share the financial statements. So a lot of the data that drives these ratios is derived right from the financial statements. So you'll hear a lot more detail on that. But I wanted to signal here, the way things turned out a little bit were unfavorable. You saw the CFI did drop back to what about 2021 was in that time frame. I did see some questions from Mike, from Kevin, great questions. Essentially, what's driving some of this? In one of the ratios, you see expendable net assets. And what is that? Why is it negative? Why is it such a gigantic number? And it relates a little bit to the comment I made earlier. So this primary reserve ratio and the viability ratio are both heavily dependent on expendable net assets. And so what is that? And why is it this big, enormous negative number? So the way to think about it is we take the endowment or all net assets of the college with and without donor restrictions. So mostly endowment, about 117 million, plus cash that we have on hand, 150 million. You then deduct from that your net investment in plant. And this gets back to deferred maintenance, this topic we heard before. So what does investment in plant mean? Well, investment in plant is the value of your property, plant, and equipment, net of accumulated depreciation. So let's say that's 500 million net of depreciation. That might be generous, but call it 500 million. And you remove from that any long-term debt you have. And we have about on the order of 300 million in debt. So if it's 200 million of investment in plant and you deduct that from your net assets with and without donor restrictions, I know this is going into a lot of detail, but it's about 150 minus 200, you have this negative $50 million number. Essentially, what it tries to do is balance how much in assets you have that you can spend and how much you can't. So it's kind of like owning a big, gigantic house, but you don't have a lot of money in the bank. So they try to balance these two things, like you can't buy food with your house. So the expendable net assets, the more that goes up, the better off your primary reserve and your viability ratio go up as well. And those were the two pieces that hurt us the most. And the reason is, if you build back your fund balance at the college, if we have more assets, more cash, build the endowment, build enrollment, do all the things that, from the operations perspective that we're supposed to do. And we see that debt sunsets in FY28, and we see a drop in that. These ratios we're on a trend to improve those over the long term. However, we still have to do a lot of work to get there. So we can't take out, a lot more debt than exists today. We do need to address the facilities so that our investment in plant improves. We do need more in net assets with or without donor restrictions, those kinds of things. So I know it's a long way of describing it, but there's a lot that goes into it, which is why I wanted to provide that auxiliary document that is now I think it was erroneously not included before, this LCC CFI document from FY 21 to 23. That explains a little bit more about the ratios themselves, how they're calculated and what they mean. So when you get this one number of 2.49, you're like, gosh, what does that mean critically unhealthy? It really means kind of the things I just spoke of. I think building back those fund balances, having appropriate cash on hand, those kinds of things, addressing deferred maintenance, all the things that we've been talking about are exactly the things that are going to improve this ratio. So I'll stop there. And actually, let's see number 5, the next slide, just see if there's anything. Okay, so not necessarily. I put those in there. They're actually comments straight out of the audit. So as we get to some of the questions, what I would encourage you to consider when you hear from the auditors in the next board meeting are, tell me about, expendable assets. Tell me about long-term debt. What do you think of that? Those kinds of things, because that leads directly to why the CFI changed unfavorably. So anyway, I'll stop. Any questions?
Excellent. We got Mike and then Zach. Mike?
Zach may have been ahead of me.
Go ahead.
So it appears like this is a snapshot in time that would have been effectively at the end of last academic year.
Yes.
So mid 2023. Do we have any idea what our CFI, what we're expecting it to look like for 24?
I would guess that it improves somewhat. And the reason I say that is what drove this number down to negative 2.49 was primarily the ratio between expendable assets and debt. And so those two things are driven by how much assets that you can save up. So if you improve the ending fund balance, having cash on hand, keeping expenses in line, which we are doing for 24, beginning to invest in plant, which will actually start in 25, but the bond is also helping to do some of those projects this year. I would say it might be modestly a little bit better, but to get back to a target of, a target ratio of 7.0 is kind of perfect world. I would say you really want to achieve to get back to 0 first, and then shoot for a 1, 2, and then 3.
If there's any additional actions we can look at to move there sooner, then let's talk about that soon. Thank you.
Okay,
Mike,
thank you.
Mike and then Denise.
So in an earlier life, I was on a council that met, it was a national council, and our job was to write standards for higher education. And in doing that work for over 10 years, we encountered numbers of things like the CFI. And this was a long time ago, but at that time, it occurred to me that as much as these instruments try to be very specific and very helpful, in a lot of ways, they're pretty blunt tools when it comes to a specific institution. And I've been one who has been critical of us for not doing better on CFI, but to sort of contradict my earlier criticisms, I'm pushed to ask the question of how bad does it hurt us if our rating isn't as stellar as we would like it to be? Does it hurt our bond rating? Does it hurt us in any measurable ways, particularly when we might be able to explain our ratings in a way that satisfies us?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that does influence is a bond rating. The nice thing is typically S&P and Moody's don't change their rating that frequently. They might change their outlook, but that's largely based on the sector. So having a negative outlook would say they're negative on the higher ed sector. I would say that enrollment and keeping expenses in line are the top biggest things they look at. So if we're delivering a balanced budget for 24 and enrollment's up, that might win out over a declining CFI from a year and a half ago or a year ago when we talked to them. So I think those fundamentals of the operations are really what they're going to pay attention to, because as some of you might very well be familiar. It's just when you're speaking to credit rating agencies, they want you to tell the story. What is LCC doing for students? What programs do you have? How's enrollment going? How's retention, graduation rates, all those things. And if all those operating trends are on the upswing, that tends to win the message over something, like a CFI. They'll take that as a grain of salt, an important one, of course, which means we got some work to do. And they're going to look at that and ask us questions about how are you addressing it, things like that. So I think it really does come back to those operating fundamentals.
Thanks.
Excellent. Denise?
So I'm wondering if we have, so a big net asset is obviously our structure, right? And the topic of tonight, well, many comments tonight, right, of dealing with our deferred maintenance and keeping our structure, our core in good shape. So do we have board policy that directs us to pay attention to this in a particular way, in a consistent way? Because it certainly sounds like we need it.
As far as deferred maintenance goes, not that I'm aware of, unless someone in the room would like to speak up and they know differently.
Dr. Balzer?
I'm not aware of any particular policy with regard to specifying deferred maintenance. I think the board, certainly there is policy around the duties of the board and the fiduciary responsibility, the responsibilities of the board. They're definitely board policy around those kinds of areas.
And I'm not thinking of any other community college that has any policies. I'm looking to Brad here. I don't know of any other community college that has something like that. So, yeah.
Well, just to follow up, just curious, having policy, does that point in a positive direction that, oh, okay, they're really taking this seriously. They're looking to improve this. They understand that this is a core asset, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great thought because strategically, I do think they do care. So S&P or Moody's or other credit rating agencies, banks, anytime you go out, beyond the college, they kind of wonder what you're doing and how you're caring for your infrastructure. So they like to see your budget and they like to ask questions about it. And deferred maintenance is typically one that a lot of colleges and universities tend to neglect. So you hear the story many, many times repeatedly that, there's, the paint's peeling and things are happening. And so I think the more you can do that, the more you signal that indeed you're caring for your assets, your infrastructure, and it recruits students too. So it's a self-fulfilling cycle. So when you have a shiny campus, students feel comfortable being there. They want to be there. So it all feeds on itself. But
And can I just ask one more?
Yeah, one more, then we'll do Steve, and then we have to move on. Denise, and then Steve. Go ahead.
Well, in anybody's experience, we talk about these programs and CTE and training students and the skill sets that students have. So do we use any of those for any appropriate repairs? I'm not saying that we're having students do, plumbing work that is, required, but couldn't certain programs take care of certain relatively minor things?
Our community benefit agreement also requires apprenticeships and so forth. So, but yeah, John, do you have any further?
I don't necessarily. I don't know some of the legalities or how that might interplay with unions and other things like that on campus. But it's certainly opportunity, But sometimes I've tossed out ideas like that. Similarly, getting students involved in our work and so forth. And there's some boundaries around those, but I would certainly defer to folks wiser than me on those.
All right, Steve.
My observation is that this institution significantly relies on going out with bonds to cut down and manage deferred maintenance over time, and partly for good reason, right? We have a long history of successfully floating bonds. As a matter of fact, I don't know of a time, there may be one, where LCC put one out there that wasn't supported by the community. So we rely on it. My guess is that we make the rating agencies aware of that fact. And so, what it says to me as a board member, and I hope to the other fellow board members, is that we don't want to get crosswise with our community, right? That we need to, our job is to consistently make them feel through our actions that we're managing this institution appropriately, so that when we do go out and say, can we have whatever it is, X amount of dollars to build a new building, but also to manage deferred maintenance, they have the trust and confidence in us that they have had historically, so that we can continue to do those things. So that's, that's how I see it. And also a reason perhaps why we wouldn't want to burden ourselves with a policy, because we can't finance this with our own resources. We need the bond, we need the community support through the bond money in order to manage our deferred maintenance over time. So it's plainly beyond our ability, other than other than our role is to maintain the trust of the community.
Thank you for the presentation. Excellent conversation. We'll be talking about this again in the near future. In the meantime, we'll move on to the year-round registration. Zach, I know you were excited about this, and I'm excited as well. Dr. Bulger.
Yes, the team really wanted to give the board information about an initiative that's going on that is going to help start to transform our student experience. And so they'd like to talk to you about the year-round registration. That's the purpose of this item.
Good evening again. Academic affairs and student affairs, we've been working very closely together this year, and we identified year-round registration as a strategic priority to be accomplished this academic year. And I am pleased to report that we are making significant progress.
All right, we're delighted to introduce you to our implementation team leaders. Jennifer Fry is unable to be here tonight, and she's been key in bringing this to this point. But also I wanted to introduce, with an overview of this initiative, Dawn Whiting and Grant Matthews. Thank you.
Good evening. Chair Fulnagi, President Bulger, members of the board, it's wonderful to be with you this evening. Again, Dr. Jennifer Fry sends her thank you for the opportunity, but unfortunately couldn't be here today, but has been influential in helping move this forward. As we start this evening, we wanted to kind of lay the foundation and just kind of provide the framework for what's allowing us to move forward with this. As many of you may remember, Dr. Jennifer Fry shared several months ago some presentations on the default academic plans. The default academic plans really are an academic planning tool that we've been working on as an institution with our advisors, with each of the academic and CTE areas, as well as the instructors and everyone, to put together plans that map and outline how students can complete their fields of study. Using these tools, we've been able to create planners, websites, and otherwise, and also catalog material that helps students understand how they can begin their program and stay on course and complete in their programs each quarter. This has also opened up opportunities to put these plans into some of the new tools that the institution is investing in, such as Navigate. And so that's one of the foundation elements that we started work on several years ago that is allowing us now to move forward. And Dawn's going to talk a little bit about the Navigate piece.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. So some of you might remember from last year, we gave a presentation to the board about 2 new pieces of software that we implemented at Lane Community College. One of them is Navigate. I'm happy to report that we continue to improve and enhance the use of these software systems. It's never great when you have a piece of software and then you sort of let it sit there and not do what it's supposed to do. So we really have put a continuous improvement model on these software systems. And so as of recently working with Navigate and the use of the academic planning tools, we've also added text messaging, full use of the early alert system, and registration campaigns as well. We've also been utilizing some of the data that comes out of the system, which is pretty exciting. Some of the services that students are using and the data around that, as well as the events. And as Grant mentioned, the Navigate system has a pretty robust tool and functional system where students can take these default academic plans, their built planners into the Navigate system, and then they can utilize those to plan out their registration or their plans for the future several terms in advance. And they can use this to kind of predict the classes that they want to take or need to take in the future.
Yeah, so by having these two foundational pieces in place, having these default academic plans that allow for that planning piece, having a tool like Navigate that allows students to, in their digital record, map out, again, using those plans or other, where they're going to take classes or when they can take classes, it really became a question of why not just allow them to register as they're putting together these plans. And so we started to talk about year-round registration and the opportunities for students to put together those plans and then implement them immediately through registration. And that's really where we started to have the conversations around what would it take for us as an institution to allow students to register more in advance than what we currently do, which is one term at a time in advance as we go. And so we started, if you go ahead and move to the next slide. So we started to talk about what we wanted as the student experience, and that student experience of being able to do that. And by focusing this on the student experience, we started to say, what is our goal if we want to change this student experience and improve that for them? So we started, but we also wanted to take into consideration the major changes in operations that take place, the systems that change in the background that follow along with this. And so we put together our plan to, starting this May, allowing students to register for 2 quarters at a time. So that would be for summer and fall. And then as the year progresses, when we begin registration for the winter and spring quarters, we will open those up at the same time. So again, the students will be able to register for two quarters at a time. And then we'll begin to roll out from there, adding on additional terms to the point where then students have up to a full year of courses available to them to not only see and plan, but then also register that align with their academic plans.
Next slide, please. So why is this a benefit? Why would we do this? So it's a benefit to students, right? So a lot of what we've talked about in developing this is creating options for students. This is just another opportunity for them to create plans, register for those plans, build their schedules out, and adding year-round registration as an option. It really just allows them to plan and set up the scheduling of classes that best meets their needs. We know that students have work and family life and things that they need to navigate. And so this really is a tool that is going to allow them to plan out in advance. Again, the EAB system itself, or the Navigate system itself, they've just changed their name. So we're still trying to transition from EAB to Navigate. The Navigate system itself allows a student to sort of put in like their work schedule or their, they're not going to be available after 6 p.m. and really build their schedule around what it is they need. Students will be able to predict when they're able to finish their program. So they'll be able to see when courses are offered and plan that out. They can do that based on part-time, full-time enrollment. It'll help them identify when they can add classes, again, based on their schedule, and when to apply for like special admission programs, when they might be completed with those, when to transfer. It's just going to give them a much clearer view of their path. And that's really the goal around this. Again, it'll let students know when classes can be offered, and so they can schedule accordingly. And it just really allows them to prioritize what works best for them. It's also going to benefit the college. So this is definitely a support for retention and enrollment. The functionality of the system also allows for a lot more planning and predictability on the college side. We can actually see in the system what classes students are projecting to take and build our schedules around that, or add classes, and adjust the academic schedules as we need to according to what students are predicting to take. And then we can continue to use this technology. As I mentioned, continuous improvement is something that we talk about a lot with our technology systems right now. And so it really allows us to leverage this Navigate system and support students in what they need to do.
Excellent. Any questions? Zach and then Lisa. Oh.
Thank you for coming. This is something that I've been really hoping for since I got on the board. So I'm just really excited to see this moving forward. So just sort of a statement first of, I really do think this is going to help students plan their degree programs and complete quickly on their time frame, and to really understand what their degree program will look like, that it'll help with enrollment and retention and quick completion. And I think the other side of it is also will give us an opportunity to intervene when students aren't being successful, that if for whatever reason they drop out of a class or they're no longer going to be able to complete their 3-term plan or 6-term plan, that it really is going to give us an opportunity to, help triage the situation and hopefully get them back on track. And then I guess the one question I had would be around the rollout for next year. It looks like winter and spring would not open up until after fall term starts. Is that correct? Have you thought about making it so that going into fall term, people could sign up for the full year this first year? Is that just not feasible?
So yes, we have thought about it. And yes, what we determined was, given the scope of change to the systems in the background and the staffing behind that, we really have worked with a large team from across campus of our classified professionals and others. And the feedback that we got was, let's try a tiered approach to it. And so we've looked at doing an initial pilot with the 2 terms, followed by a second pilot of the second 2 terms, then rolling out to the full year in the second year.
Thank you.
All right, Lisa, and then Denise.
So in the last couple of board meetings and public input, we've heard from students the need for more advising. And so I would be software is great, and they need support understanding what classes to put into the system, right? So I'm curious, how are we going to support students' needs and advising, given the fact that they're going to be, forecasting so far in advance, and as Zach mentioned, potentially needing intervention in the middle. So
Take that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So we don't anticipate that all students will use this right when it's launched. What we're hoping is that this kind of evens out the advising workload a little bit, so that we're not building every single term. And the advisors can spend a little bit more time planning longer term, rather than sitting with a student every single term, 4 terms in a row. As an academic advisor from a college that rotated quarter or terms every 8 weeks, that's a lot of work to have to sit with a student every 8 weeks and plan that out. And so being able to predict and sort of plan that out for students, I think will actually even out the workload just a little bit. It's a great tool for the advisors as well, this Navigate. They can actually look at the schedules as well, sit with the student, work together to make that a schedule that works for them. So I think the advising team will really enjoy working with this tool as well.
And I would add, I think that one of the benefits to this is really helping as an institution to institutionalize the concept of the default academic plans, which will allow for both students, advisors, and schedulers and others to really be looking at it in a way that will facilitate those future conversations around advising. So there is still work to do. So it's not perfect, but we hope that it will help smooth that out.
Excellent. Denise?
Thank you for really considering this plan. As a former faculty for many years, scheduling is absolutely critical in this, and there are certain majors, right, that have a very particular path, and so obviously being able to do a couple quarters at a time is very important to that. But in the land of scheduling, it also means having some way to communicate. If you're a student and you're getting frustrated because the course that you need next in the sequence, okay, is not being offered. Okay, because that happens with some courses, right? So I think back to the advising and communication systems that are going to be so important, especially as this rolls out and you try and really look at where the glitches might be. I think that is going to be, really, really critical piece to be able to get some pretty quick feedback so that you can work those things out, because there will definitely be quite a few of those.
Yes, thank you. We are looking forward to all those little challenges. One of the nice things is that, by doing this, we have the ability to do the planning out to the year or so, but that it doesn't take away any of the flexibility of being able to add sections or other things as needed.
All right, Steve.
I too, just like most of the other board members, I think who've spoken, think this, adds a lot. So I'm glad that we're doing it. And then like others have expressed, I'm worried about some, potential, I don't know, places where it hurts or in ways that we couldn't easily anticipate. Do you think this disadvantages students who, for whatever reason, decide they can only register one term at a time?
That has been a topic that has come up. And for the most part, I would say we don't believe it will. For one thing, it's not a mandatory tool. So students aren't required to do the year-long registration. It would be by choice. So they would still maintain the ability to register term to term, as well as change their schedule quarterly as needed. Additionally, what we're looking at is the predictive nature of using this will allow us to look at sections and types of courses that are particularly popular or that are filling up for whatever reason, and be able to then schedule new courses and have the ability to reach out to part-time or other instructors that may be necessary earlier than we may have been able to previously. And the anticipation is that students won't be disadvantaged by not signing up a year in advance or not signing up early. We'll still have options, even if they are doing a later registration, but we'll have the ability to see that pattern earlier on and make the changes to the schedule as necessary to accommodate that, and still offer those courses to students that are doing some of that last minute registration.
You don't need to answer this other question, but just making sure that there's thoughts that I have, and I'm sure you're thinking about all these things times 10. So I get that. It's your job, not mine. But I guess I worry a little bit about, or wonder a little bit about how we are incentivizing students who, so they register at this, fall and winter, or well, I guess it was winter and spring, to give the example. Halfway through winter, they realize whatever, life's going to change. They're not going to be here in the spring. How do we, and again, you don't have to answer this, but it's important, right, to, especially as we plan this out over longer periods of time, or give them, to incentivize them to tell us when they've changed their plans, right? They won't naturally do that unless there's something that compels them to do so. So again, I'm sure you're thinking about it, but I have worries about, what happens as you give people greater and greater opportunities to schedule out, and how that can actually in various ways work against us.
We will add that to our very long list of what happens when questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you once again for that presentation, and really good to hear about this. We'll move on to the closing items. Thank you again for that conversation. Future meeting dates. Kevin, I'm sorry, there are 2 meetings. I'm just kidding, April. But I do want to state, though, that your comments last time in regards to the validity of having 2 meetings per month. We have a meeting, agenda setting meeting that's coming up in the future, and we're going to discuss how to approach that conversation. But also, in complete defiance, look at the May calendar, because we have 4 meetings scheduled for that too, that are budgetary committee meetings, and 2 that are standard board meetings. So just note those dates, because May is a really busy month for us as a board, and a busy time period for the budget committee. So just note those 2 dates as we are coming into April and in May. Any questions about future meeting dates? Seeing, Denise, yes. Sorry, you're on mute.
Do you mind just repeating those dates if you have them right in front of you?
Yep, I do have them in front of me. It is May 1st, 3rd, 8th. Oh, I'm sorry. 3rd is spring conference. Ignore 3rd. 1st, 8th, 15th, and 22nd. The 1st is a regular board meeting. The 15th is a work session. The 8th and the 22nd are budget committee meetings.
Okay, so basically it's every Wednesday in May, except for the last Wednesday.
Correct.
Is that right?
Think so. I don't have a
Yeah.
calendar in front of me, but yes, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. All right, great conversation about the meeting dates. Board questions and comments. Any questions, comments from the board? I do have a comment and a question for the board in regards to some recent news. So as you know, the legislative session, the short session ended, and conversation around the concept of direct admission systems for community colleges, meaning that high school graduates essentially get automatically admitted directly into community colleges and so forth. Recently, Portland Community College and Beaverton High School are looking to perform a pilot where there's an automatic admission beginning in 2025. I see a lot of benefits of a direct admission process for our institution as a whole across Lane County and the Lane County school districts. And I'm really interested in having conversations with the president about how any board action that we would could potentially take towards something like a direct admissions, and what are the things that we should look at as an institution for a direct admissions model for our local school districts. So just wanted to kind of get Austin, that's a terrible idea, or Austin, or just just having initial conversations, if that would be a good starting point. So hearing some good things. Mike?
I like the idea. It would be helpful to me to get a refresher on comparing direct admissions to what are we currently doing.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure I fully understand the
100%.
process.
100%. And there's some documents, especially that the Higher Education Commission, as well as the Education Commission of States. They have some great documents that I'll share with I'll share with the president and share with the board. Zach?
Yeah, I had the same question is, are we turning away students now? Like if you are a graduate of an Oregon high school or with a GED, are you effectively allowed or are we denying people based on GPA or other reasons?
Dr. Roger?
We can certainly, I think that trustee Diamond wanted to get in as well, but oh no, okay, sure. We can certainly bring back some information and maybe have in one of the work sessions, have a discussion about what the process is around high school graduates being admitted into the institution, what that process looks like, what some of the legislations looks like, what some of the colleges are doing, what we are doing in terms of our partnerships. And so we can certainly bring something like that back.
Absolutely. Perfect. Oh, Denise.
Well, to that point, I just want to reemphasize what many of us have said. The advisory, that personal connection, like we heard from the aviation report, that's immeasurable. It really is. When we have those registration orientation type days and people get a sense of personal contact, when letters go out or phone calls, I think all of that really, really matters. I think that we can't do enough of that. So I really hope we keep in mind how important our counseling advisory processes are to students and to knowing that they can get a hold of someone and address their concerns. Because from my experience, we in our experienced adult working world may feel like, oh, if you have a question, you just go to the supervisor or this one or that one and ask. But students are much more reluctant to bring up issues or questions that they have, and encouraging them to keep the conversation and the door open so we can keep telling them, faculty, staff, counselors can keep letting them know about all the resources and options that the college has. It is so important because we have so much to offer. It's just making sure the students know and communicate that to them.
Absolutely agree. All right, any further discussion? Or comments or questions? Seeing none, we do not have an executive session after the meeting today, so we are adjourned.